She sneaks around the world from India to Carolina. She's a sticky finger culture from Berlin down to Belize. Take you for a ride on a snowboat to China. Tell me where in the world is Carmen San Diego? Still there's soul and suffering.
Hello and welcome everyone to this week's Live in Divine Harmony podcast. I'm Karmen, your divine synergist of Heart's Joy. I'm an awakened person of purpose, a spiritual life coach. I have a passion for life. I'm an author, podcast host, numerologist, and certified in theta healing. Every week we have a discussion, and this week's discussion on the podcast is titled, Where in the World is Karmen Fink? Where have I been? Because it's been a few weeks since I last went live on the podcast. And for those of you who follow me on social media, you've noticed that it's also been hit or miss as well. So I thought I'd take this time as I came back from a 2+ week reset and share with you where I've been and what I learned during my reset. And of course, I've always wanted to do a fun spoof on one of my favorite shows or games for those of you who grew up in the 90s. Where in the world is Carmen San Diego? Thought it was very apropos. So for those of you who are joining live, be sure to join us in the comments in the chat. For those of you who are going to be replying, same thing, or for those who are tuning in to the podcast, thank you all so much for joining this week. So a few weeks ago, I allowed myself to get distracted. I allowed my focus to shift and get distracted instead of finding the harmony between my personal and professional life. And honestly, even before that, I started to forget my dreams. I started to forget my big vision, my why am I here, and the big plans that I have for myself. And I was so focused on surviving that I forgot to serve. I forgot to step into that serving energy, which shifts you into thriving. So when things in my personal life, they started to go south, I felt like God was saying, did you forget about your dreams? Did you forget about why I created you? And then I heard the phrase, it is time. So I decided to take a weekend to give myself a reset. And I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever done this before? And what did your reset look like? Now, for me, this reset meant I needed to focus and tend to my personal life in order to continue to pour into you and to guide you along your spiritual journey. And during that weekend, I took time to get out my journal where back in 2020, I started to write down what my dream home would look like, what my daily life would look like, what kind of person I'd be to have all of this. And I allowed myself to start to dream again. And I started to dream again about the large conference that I've been planning for years, on and off. I started to dream again about what type of partner and relationship I'd like to experience. And I started to step back into my big vision, my why. Why am I here? And it honestly felt overwhelmingly intoxicating. And something shifted for me that weekend. Have you ever had an experience where you know something shifted, you just aren't sure what it was? Then the next weekend, I saw some familiar faces I hadn't seen in a while, probably 6 months or so. And they started to reflect back to me how peaceful I looked, and I felt peaceful. They shared with me how I looked transformed. And it's again one of those where you feel it and you aren't sure. You aren't sure how you got there. And have you ever looked in the mirror and you're like, I don't recognize this person? And I mean that in a really good way. And it's one of those that I didn't see it myself and I felt it. I felt like I was still on a little bit of a roller coaster at this point, and I knew that my reset wasn't quite finished yet. And by the way, during this reset time, I allowed myself some time to just go with the flow, not plan a whole lot, and if I did, to just allow it to flow. And for me, going to visit my spirit animals, which is the ducks, and feeding them. And when I go, I normally ask the question, what message do you have for me? And for me, this gives me an automatic reset. Even if it's 5 minutes, I get a quick reset. And I allowed myself time to splurge on eating decadent food and purchasing crystals to help me with my reset. I gave myself space to reset. You see, during this reset, I chose myself. That bleeds into the relationship with God. And that connection, it's always there. It's a matter of, are you tuning into it through your relationship with yourself? Now, I started to focus on creating a win-win in my life and making sure that each day was a win-win. I used to pack my calendars. Let me know if this is you. I used to pack them with all sorts of things, being busy, yet did I ever get anything really accomplished? No. By the way, that's a trauma response. And when you start to understand that and start to understand that trauma and heal it, as you heal it, then you will start to shift your days. And this is something that I teach in the mini class and even in the master class as well. So for me, a win-win, for example, is giving myself time in the mornings to do my morning routine, to do the journaling, the stretching, the meditation. How am I nourishing my body? How am I nourishing my mind? And how am I nourishing my spirit? And of course, for me, it's through food and movement, music, journaling. So ask yourself, how are you creating a win-win? Meaning you're still pouring back into yourself so that you can then pour into others as well. My ultimate goal is always focused on serving you. Always. To empower you, to give you tools for your life toolbox, if you will, to help you along your spiritual journey. And in order for me to do that, I too get to have that reset, show myself grace as well. And I started to find myself, and I got the download very clear last weekend, to start to move into a different style of teaching. And when I hear these things, I've learned not to question it. I used to question these things. Why? What does this mean? What is this going to look like? You know, and so I just said, okay, thank you for the message. And then I got very clearly that instead of teaching in small intimate groups like I have been, that it's time for me to pre-record all of the material and add it to the online community that's already out there, and then coach inside of that community. That's really why I built the community, was to coach you, to create space for us, for you to learn, for you to grow. Now, the other thing I heard was that this is going to allow me to be in alignment with my human design. So now I can fully serve you. I haven't been able to fully serve you because I was essentially holding myself back. And if you're not familiar with human design, let me know in the comments. I've got a couple of people that I could send you to work with. When you start to have this awareness of how your energy flows, and you start leaning into this, it's going to set you up for success. It's very similar to numerology because I look at your life path, and as long as you're within that energy of your life path of what you should be doing for a living, that's part of your purpose as well, then you're golden. And yes, it means me changing both my mindset and my habits. It means letting go of the old and fully stepping into this new life. You just didn't know how to get there. I didn't know how to get there. It's almost like God said, I've got to stop you now and go under this reset. You may not understand why, you may not understand what's going on, and that's okay. You're not supposed to know the how. It's probably been one of my biggest lessons up until now, up until this year. It's not up to you, that's up to God. It's up to you to listen and to move forward. Now, part of changing habits is interrupting the pattern. And I know that Tony Robbins talks a lot about this. Interrupt your pattern. Why? When you interrupt the pattern, it's a catalyst for the change to occur. If the pattern isn't interrupted, how can anything be different? In fact, just yesterday, I re-injured my back, and it brought me back a flood of memories from years ago when I injured my back and had to have back surgery. And today, I had to really move through a lot of old emotions. And I started to realize that this injury, it's interrupting a pattern so that I can create a new one. I'm truly finally at this end of a cycle in my life that I've been wanting to be at the end of for many years. And I'm here. And at the same time, I'm simultaneously creating the new cycle. So I'd like to share with you 4 lessons that I learned during this reset. The first lesson that I learned is that the old Karmen would have completely pushed through. It's not healthy. It's not healthy mentally. It's not healthy emotionally or physically. And that is an old story, an old paradigm that I was, essentially told just push through. The second lesson that I learned is that the old Karmen would not have created boundaries. The old Karmen would not have allowed herself time to be someone else's. I would have allowed my time to be someone else's. And I would have been burnt out. And then I would have been angry and mad because I didn't speak up for myself. And notice I didn't say healthy boundaries. I actually did a podcast on that many months ago. I created boundaries. And again, I focused on the win-win. The third lesson I learned is the old Karmen would think I'm letting everyone down. And that's just ego talking. I go live because these are messages that I've been told to share with you. They are not forced. That's not the point. So for some reason you see that I'm not going live or something's not happening this week on the podcast, I don't have a message for you yet. I used to try to please everybody, when in reality, I can't serve from an empty cup. It's simply not possible. That's where it feels forced. And again, not going with the flow. And ultimately, the old Karmen would not have valued herself, her time, and her energy. I'm very particular now about who I share space with on a personal level and how I spend my time. The activities I now choose to do are completely different because I've changed. Remember, when you look at the numerology for this year, we are in a relationship energy year. And for me, these 4 lessons have been coming for a while and really started to come to the surface back in January of this year. It's having self-awareness and the courage to let go of the old you, to let go of the old habits. You can't have that thing you want. You can't have that dream life, that dream job, that dream relationship if you're still holding on to the old you. When you let go of your old life, this allows you to create a life you love. Now, if you've enjoyed what I shared in this week's episode, you're invited to join a community of like-minded beings. We support each other along our spiritual journeys and allow space for growth in order for you to create a life you love. The beauty is that it's free. It's not on social media. It is not a Facebook group. And you can access it from your phone, and you can also access it from your laptop 24/7. And this is where I'm going to focus my time, is in this online community. And the community is called Creating Life You Love. I've dropped a link, hearts-joy.mn.co. If you have any questions at all, please let me know. And I would also love to hear from you. I would love to hear from you about your reset, where you are right now. How can I support you during this time? Because let me tell you, the second half of this year is going to be like a rocket ship. We had what I call quick change in August, and I am so excited and cannot wait to experience the rest of 2022. Y'all, eclipse season is coming. We're going to need each other. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to share this message with others. Please be sure to like and follow, subscribe wherever you're watching from. Now, I am not going live next week because it is a holiday, and I'll be live the next week for sure. Sending you much love.